September 1951. A Navy transport plane carrying 21-year-old Clint Eastwood crashes into the freezing Pacific Ocean off California. What that night taught him about survival would shape one of his greatest films 65 years later. Here is the story. A 21-year-old Clint Eastwood was treading water in the Black Pacific Ocean, watching his life jacket slowly deflate as freezing waves crashed over his head. What he learned in those dark hours would change how he directed one of Hollywood's most acclaimed survival stories 65 years later. It was September 1951, and Private Clinton Eastwood Jr. was returning from a weekend pass to Seattle aboard a Navy AD-1 Skyraider transport plane. The flight from McChord Air Force Base to his duty station at Fort Ord should have been routine, a quick hop down the California coast that dozens of servicemen made every week. Clint had enlisted in the Army during the Korean War, though he'd managed to avoid overseas deployment by being stationed at Fort Ord near Monterey. At 21, he was tall, lean, and quietly confident in the way that would later define his screen presence. But nothing in his Oakland upbringing had prepared him for what was about to happen in the cold waters off Point Reyes. The trouble started 2 hours into the flight. The pilot, Lieutenant James Parker, noticed the fuel gauge dropping faster than it should. Then came the engine cough, subtle at first, then more pronounced. Through the small passenger window, Clint could see the coastline of Northern California, but it looked impossibly far away. "We're losing fuel pressure," Parker announced over the intercom, his voice professionally calm but tight with concern. "I'm going to try to make it to the nearest airfield, but everyone needs to prepare for a possible water landing." Water landing. The euphemism didn't fool anyone aboard. They all knew what that meant. In 1951, ditching in the Pacific Ocean was often a death sentence, especially at night in September when the water temperature hovered around 50 degrees. Clint felt his heart rate spike, but he forced himself to remain outwardly calm. He had always been good at that, keeping his emotions locked down when things got dangerous. It was a skill that would serve him well in the next few hours and in countless film sets decades later. The engine died completely at 8:47 p.m., 20 miles offshore from Point Reyes. Parker had managed to get them closer to land than seemed possible, but they were still far from safety. The plane began its descent toward the black water, and Clint could hear the wind rushing past the fuselage as they dropped. "Brace for impact," Parker called out. "When we hit, get out fast. The plane won't stay afloat long." The Skyraider hit the Pacific like a thrown stone, the impact jarring every bone in Clint's body. Icy water immediately began rushing into the cabin. In the chaos and darkness, Clint found himself underwater, disoriented, fighting panic as he struggled to find which way was up. He broke the surface gasping, treading water as the plane's tail section disappeared beneath the waves. The silence that followed was absolute, except for the sound of waves and his own ragged breathing. The other passengers and crew were scattered across the dark water, their voices calling out in the distance. Clint had managed to grab a life jacket, but it was damaged, slowly losing air as he floated in the freezing Pacific. The California coast, which had looked so close from the air, was now an invisible line somewhere in the darkness. He could see no lights, no landmarks, nothing but black water extending in every direction. The cold was immediate and brutal. Within minutes, Clint could feel it seeping into his core, making his muscles stiff and unresponsive. He knew from Navy training that hypothermia would kill him long before he could swim to shore, but staying in one place meant certain death. So he began swimming toward where he thought the coast might be, using a modified side stroke to conserve energy while keeping his head above the relentless waves. Every few minutes, he would stop and listen for the sound of other survivors, for rescue boats, for anything that might indicate help was coming. Hours passed. Clint's life jacket was nearly flat now, providing almost no buoyancy. His arms and legs were numb, moving more from determination than sensation. He'd lost track of time completely, focused only on the rhythm of swimming, breathing, surviving. Then he saw it. Phosphorescence in the water. The microscopic organisms that sometimes made the Pacific glow with an eerie blue-green light were swirling around his movements, creating trails of luminescence with each stroke. In his exhausted, hypothermic state, it seemed almost supernatural, as if the ocean itself was guiding him. What Clint didn't know was that a Coast Guard radio operator at Point Reyes had picked up the plane's distress signal. Search and rescue boats were already heading toward the crash site, but in the darkness and rough seas, finding survivors was nearly impossible. At 3:20 a.m., after almost 7 hours in the water, Clint heard something that made him stop swimming. Waves breaking on rocks. He was close to shore, closer than he dared to hope. Using the last of his strength, he swam toward the sound, finally feeling sand and rocks beneath his numb feet as a wave carried him onto the beach near Mussel Rock. He crawled out of the surf and collapsed on the sand, barely conscious, his body shaking uncontrollably from hypothermia and exhaustion. A local fisherman found him at dawn, unconscious but alive, and called for medical help. Lieutenant Parker had also survived, washing ashore 3 miles south of where Clint landed. 2 other passengers weren't as fortunate. Their bodies were recovered days later by the Coast Guard. Clint spent 3 days in the hospital recovering from hypothermia and exhaustion. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. Most people wouldn't have survived more than 2 hours in water that cold, let alone 7. When asked how he'd managed it, Clint just shrugged. "I kept swimming," he said simply. The experience changed something fundamental in Clint Eastwood, not dramatically, not in a way that was obvious to others, but in the quiet, internal way that near-death experiences reshape a person's understanding of fate, resilience, and the thin line between life and death. He returned to Fort Ord, completed his military service, and eventually found his way to Hollywood. The scared young man who'd treaded water in the Black Pacific became the stoic actor who specialized in playing survivors, men who endured impossible odds with quiet determination. But it wasn't until 2016, 65 years after that night, that the full significance of Clint's survival story became clear. Clint was in pre-production for Sully, the film about Captain Chesley Sullenberger's emergency landing on the Hudson River. As director, Clint was known for his meticulous attention to detail, but his approach to the water sequences in Sully bordered on obsessive. Tom Hanks, who played Sullenberger, noticed it immediately. "Clint knew exactly how cold water should look," Hanks later said in interviews. "He knew the weight of it, the way it moves around aircraft, the panic and the calm that can coexist in those moments. It wasn't theoretical knowledge." During filming of the Hudson River crash sequence, Clint insisted on multiple takes of shots that other directors might have captured in 1 or 2 attempts. He wanted the water temperature precisely matched to what it would have been in January. He wanted the actors to experience genuine cold, genuine discomfort. "The water doesn't care about your story," Clint told the cast during one particularly difficult day of filming. "It doesn't care if you're a hero or a coward, it just is. You survive it or you don't." Aaron Eckhart, who played co-pilot Jeff Skiles, was struck by Clint's intensity during the water scenes. "He would watch the monitors with this expression I'd never seen before," Eckhart recalled, like he was seeing something the rest of us couldn't see. What Clint was seeing, though he never explicitly said so, were memories of phosphorescent trails in dark water, of a life jacket slowly deflating, of the moment when swimming toward an invisible shore becomes the only choice between life and death. In post-production, Clint spent weeks perfecting the sound design of the Hudson River crash, the way water rushes into the cabin, the silence that follows impact, the muffled voices of passengers and crew trying to orient themselves in a world suddenly turned upside down. Most people who make movies about survival have never actually survived anything, observed Warner Brothers executive Frank Bauer, who worked closely with Clint on Sully. Clint brought a different kind of authenticity to it. The film's water scenes became some of the most praised elements of Sully. Critics noted the visceral realism of the crash sequence, the way audiences could almost feel the cold Hudson River water. What they didn't know was that Clint's direction came from a place of genuine memory, genuine understanding of what it means to fight for survival in hostile water. During the film's press tour, a reporter asked Clint about his approach to directing survival stories. His answer was characteristically brief, but revealing. "Water doesn't lie. People do, but water doesn't. If you're going to show someone fighting for their life, you better make it real." In a private moment after the Sully premiere, Clint was standing with his longtime producer Robert Lorenz when the subject came up again. Lorenz had worked with Clint for over a decade, but had never heard the full story of the 1951 plane crash. "You know," Clint said quietly, watching the crowd of celebrities and press, "if I hadn't made it that night off Point Reyes, half the movies you know me from wouldn't exist. Every character I've played who had to survive something impossible, every story I've directed about ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, it all goes back to those 7 hours in the Pacific." He paused, that familiar Eastwood pause that could stretch for what seemed like minutes. "That water taught me something I've never forgotten," he continued. "You don't survive by being dramatic about it. You don't survive by making speeches or having emotional breakdowns. You survive by doing the next thing, and then the next thing after that, until you're not drowning anymore." Today, Sully is considered one of Clint's finest directorial achievements, praised for its understated realism and authentic portrayal of survival under pressure. The film earned Tom Hanks an Academy Award nomination and grossed over $240 million worldwide. But for those who know the full story, Sully represents something deeper than just another successful Clint Eastwood film. It's the culmination of a survival story that began in 1951 when a young soldier refused to give up in dark water, and ended 65 years later with an old director ensuring that another survival story was told with the honesty and respect that only someone who'd been there could provide. The night Clint Eastwood nearly drowned in the Pacific Ocean shaped not just his character, but his art. Every quiet hero he would later play, every story of resilience he would direct, carried within it the memory of phosphorescent water and the knowledge that survival is often just a matter of swimming toward shore even when you can't see it. This is the true story of how near death becomes wisdom and how one night of survival can echo through decades of cinema. Have you ever had a moment that seemed like the end but turned out to be a beginning? Share your survival story in the comments. And remember that the experiences that almost break us often become the foundation of our greatest strengths. Sometimes our worst nights become our greatest teachers. That freezing Pacific water in 1951 gave Clint wisdom he'd use for 65 years. Share a moment that changed your perspective. Subscribe for more untold Clint Eastwood stories.